بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أزواجه وذريته أجمعين اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي يا ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين وصلى وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها صلى وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Okay, so we had stopped here. Let's go back a bit. Thus physics studies the material world, that is to say, the world revealed by the senses. The mental processes involved in this study, that is, study of physics, and similarly religious and aesthetic experience, though part of the total range of experience, are excluded from the scope of physics. For the obvious reason, it's not so obvious, that physics is restricted to the study of the material world, by which we mean the world of things we perceive. I think the main question is whether we can study anything, including the material world, without our preconceptions. So, preconceptions or conceptions, same things, I think. The question is whether we can study anything. Without prior conceptions. And physics studies whatever it studies with prior conceptions. And those prior conceptions are linked to at least an implicit worldview and morality or a lack of it. So physics doesn't go and studies the material world with empty head, for example. It approaches the world with a specific purpose to understand, of course, but with a specific conception of understanding. So that's important. So excluded from the scope of physics for the obvious reason that physics is restricted to. We will say, is it possible to restrict something to purely material world? And we would say no, because when you say you are restricting it to the study of the material world, you are restricting it with your alternative conceptions or preconception. But when I ask you that ask you what are the things you perceive in the material universe, we will of course mention the familiar things around you, the earth, the sky, mountains, chairs, tables, etc. When I further ask you what exactly you perceive of these things, you will answer their qualities. Do we? I mean, we can perceive the qualities, but we have to actually pay attention and do some sort of a distancing act in order to perceive quality. Normally, we perceive things as a whole, or depending on what we want to perceive. So even our day-to-day interaction with the world are with certain preconceptions, aims, and purposes, and etc. So it is clear that in answering such a question, we are really putting an interpretation on the evidence of us. Not just interpretation. The very excess, I think, interpretation comes afterwards. I think the very access to the world requires conceptions or preconception. And interpretation and explanation comes afterwards. Conceptions are our windows to the world in a sense. The interpretation consists in making the distinction between things and its qualities. I think what we require is attention in a sense, and abstraction. And interpretation, obviously, in some minimal sense, is always working, but what we call interpretation is something which comes afterwards. This really amounts to a theory of matter, that is, of nature of sense data, their relation to the perceiving mind, and their ultimate cause. So, in a sense, is coming at a similar sort of stuff, saying that a physics must have a theory of matter or theory of the world before it approaches the world. Now, what that theory is, according to him, the substance of this theory is the following. Let's see. This is from a book, Matter, Life, Mind, and God by Hornell, a German-born South African philosopher. Apparently, the sense objects, colors, sounds are the states of perceiver's mind, and as such excluded from nature, regarded as something objective. For this reason, they cannot be in any proper sense qualities or physical things. Well, that's one view, I guess. And when I say the sky is blue, it can only mean the sky produces a blue sensation in my mind. And not that the color blue is quality found in the sky, but there is something in the sky which is producing that quality, say. And the same can be applied to the sky as a whole. As mental state, they are impression, that is to say, they are effects produced in us. The cause of these effects, the question is whether these are effects in the causal sense or effects in a more primordial sense, in the sense of the opening up of something. The cause of these effects is matter. Matter is itself an abstraction. The cause of those effects is what is there. that is sky. Partially anyway. So the cause of these effects is matter or material things acting through our senses, organ, nerves, and brain and mind. This is sort of empiricist philosophy. The physical cause acts by contact or impact, and hence it must possess the qualities of shape, size, solidity, and resistance. So this is the sort of Lockean um, understanding of experience. It was the philosopher Berkeley who first undertook to refute this theory of matter as the unknown cause of our sensations. Okay, in our own time, Professor Whitehead. So, I mean, Allama Iqbal's instinct is to go to idealists, even though Berkeley is a different sort of idealist than Hegel, but is still idealist. And going to idealists sort of to fight sort of materialism of physics, which was sort of dominant in the 19th century, that physics was based on materialism of this sort, and there was nothing else there, materialism, and that materialism worked through cause and effect, so there was no room for freedom, and that's why there's no room for morality, just roughly speaking. So fighting that materialism became sort of a rallying cry for reinstating morality and religion. So what you needed was a different conception of, or different justification of physics, and different understanding of how physics works. So this is in part Allama Iqbal's project here as well. In our own times, Professor Whitehead, an eminent mathematician and scientist, I don't know whether he was a scientist, in what sense you can call Whitehead a scientist. He was a mathematician and logician, has conclusively shown, how can he show conclusively, that traditional theory of materialism is wholly untenable. Materialism, sort of theory underlying British empiricism, Hobbes, and it is obvious that on the theory, colors, sounds are subjective states only, not really. I mean, even in Locke, there are color, sounds theory, or the so-called secondary qualities are not subjective states. They're still the outcome of the interaction between primary qualities and human mind. But what was I going to say? Yeah, but that was one view, one interpretation of Locke's theory, no doubt. What enters the eye and ear is not color or sound, but invisible ether waves and inaudible air waves. Nature is not what we know her to be, as portrayed by empiricism, or this sort of empiricism. Our perceptions are illusions and cannot be regarded as genuine disclosures of nature. according to the theory, which that is in nature according is into mental impressions, and on the one hand, an unverifiable, imperceptible entities producing the impressions on the other. Because British empiricism actually logically, it's called empiricism, but it logically leads to a sort of solipsism and idealism, because the way they describe our experience, it becomes very hard to understand how you get out of your brain, for example. Uh, um, and it's no doubt that the modern or the contemporary today, contemporary um, analytical philosophy of mind, etc., which sort of is descendant from and is the heir to British empiricism, is still today, struggles to overcome this dichotomy. And obviously it also goes back to Descartes, who is sort of also also the godfather of British empiricism as well, in a sense, because Cartesianism is developed in two streams. One stream is the British empiricism, and the other one is continental rationalism. So, if physics constitute a really coherent and genuine knowledge of perceptibly known object, the traditional theory of matter must be rejected. And for the obvious reason that it reduces the evidence of our senses. Not just evidence of our senses, because sense don't interact with the world in isolation. So when we talk about senses, that's an abstraction as well, because the way we engage with the outer world is through our body, through our mind, holistically. Anyway, as shown by phenomenologists of various types, etc., and seconded by and supported by modern neurology and psychology. On which alone the physicists, knowledge of perception, the traditional theory must be rejected for the obvious reason that it reduces the evidence of our senses, on which alone the physicist, as observer and experimenter, must rely, to the mere impressions of the observer's mind. So basically, he is saying that physics is all right, but the theory of the matter which philosophers have constructed and the materialist version of physics have constructed is untenable. So, and that's why he would lean towards relativity and quantum physics, and would be excited about it, because that seemed to him at the time anyway to reject this theory of matter. And the motivation for rejecting this theory of matter is because this theory of matter apparently left no room for religion and morality and freedom of action, etc. Okay, let's stop here and we'll continue from here, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها، اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم ألف بين قلوبهم وأصلح ذات بينهم، اللهم سدد رميهم وسدد رايهم وسدد خطاهم. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم اقتل وانتقم من الذين يقتلون الأبرياء والأطفال في غزة وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم شتت شملهم ومزق جمعهم وخرب بيوتهم ودمر ديارهم ودلدل أقدامهم وأنزل بهم بأسك الذي لا ترده عن القوم المجرمين. اللهم لا ترفع لهم راية ولا تحقق لهم غاية واجعلهم عبرة وغاية للعالمين يا رب العالمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم